Hello everyone! At this time, I would like to share with you the activity that I used to perform when I compute my grades, my students' grades as a teacher. Okay, so I would like to share some techniques that I am using in my own way in making my task easy about computing grades, that is by the use of the Microsoft Excel application. Okay, so before I do the computation of the grades of my students, so suppose this is the format of a grading sheet on the subject that I handle. So before I do the computation, I first do create a template which will speed up the transmuted grade, okay, or the computation of the transmuted grade of the students in each criteria. So suppose we have quiz. Okay, so suppose this is the scores of the students in the first quarter quizzes. So I have here quiz 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in the particular quarter, I gave them 5 quizzes with a varied number of items. For the quiz 1, we have 10 items, quiz 2, 15 items, quiz 3, 10 items, quiz 4, 20 items, and quiz 5, 25 items. So to sum up the total number of items for all the quizzes in the first quarter, at this time I will be using a formula. Okay, so the formula will be, okay, so as I've told you in our previous lesson that in starting with a formula, we are to type equal sign. Okay, so that Microsoft Excel will take it as a formula, or that entry will be interpreted by the Microsoft Excel as a formula. Okay, so equal sign, then click. So instead of typing the cell address, which is B3, you just have to click at a particular cell which you want to include in the computation. Then type the operator which you want to use, and that is addition. Click again on the item, type again the operator, click again. Automatically, the Excel will just display the cell address of that particular value you click. Then addition, click again. So if you can't anymore click at the cell, you just have to use the arrow. Okay, so at this time I used arrow to the left to point at the value here. Then after which, if you are already done with all the values and the cell addresses in the formula, you just have to enter or click at enter. There you have it. So the total number of items in the quiz is 80. So that's how I do the computation, or the what we call summation or addition in my computing. Okay. So next we have to compute the scores of the students. So each of the student has varied test result or quiz results or scores. So in computing, we will be using the same formula. Okay, so this one, but I will again perform how to do it. So again, in starting with a formula, we are to start with equal sign. Then we click at the value we want to include in the formula, then type the operator, click again, type, click again, type, click again, type. If you can't anymore click at this value, just have to click arrow or move through the arrow keys, arrow to the left. Then after which, enter. So there you have it. This is already the result of the computation of this formula. Okay, so since I want to follow the same formula to the rest of the students' scores, I want to do the same computation. All I have to do is to just click at the fill handle here, then drag down to copy the same formula to the rest of the scores. So there you have it. So this is already the result of the computation. Okay, so that's how I do the computation. Now, let's move on to the transmutation of the grade based on the total score of the students. So let's say the 0 will have an equivalent grade of 60. Suppose, no? So we will be using a formula for that. So for 0 to be 60, we are to do this. Okay, so I will now make a computation formula or a transmuted transmutation formula. So we shall start with the equal sign. Click at the score of the student. Then divide it to the total number of items, that is 80. Okay. Then times 240 plus 60. 60 here is the equivalent grade for 0. Okay. Then after which, click enter. So 94 here is the equivalent grade for the 68 score out of 80. Okay, so I want to copy the same formula to the rest of the students' scores, or I'll do the same computing to the rest of the records. So if I do that, I don't think the next computation will give me a correct result. Okay, so what I'm talking right now is about the use of the references. Okay, so previously I have discussed with you the references. So we have this what we call absolute and relative. So we are to decide or make something to make this particular content, this one, the 80, absolute. So to make that one absolute, we are to press, make sure that the cell address here is highlighted or is clicked. Then press function 4 or F4. Okay, there you have it. Microsoft Excel set it as an absolute reference. That means when we copy or drag the formula, it will give us a correct result. Okay, there you have it. Why? Because the G3 does not change when you copy the formula or drag the formula, but the rest of the cell addresses adjusts to its exact location, and that's what we mean by relative reference. And this one is an absolute reference. There you have it. So that's how we do the computation of the scores or of the scores using the Microsoft Excel formula. Okay, so let's now move on to the creation of a grade, and still we will be using formula, Excel formula. So suppose this is the format, okay, of a grading sheet. So suppose I made a template for each criteria, okay, for the periodical test, for the performance, for the project. So I'll do the same thing, okay. I'll make a transmutation grade for each student's performance. Then suppose those are already here, okay, so those results are already displayed here. So for the quiz, we have here 88, 95, 82, and so on. For the periodical test, we have 86, 88, 87. For the performance, we have 85, 88, 89, and so on. For the project, we have here 92, 91, and so on. So suppose this is what composes the whole grade for the ICT subject. So quiz is 10% of the grade, the periodical test is 25% of the grade, the performance is 40% of the grade, and the project is 25% of the grade. That's what makes 100% here in the tentative grade. Okay, and later we shall be computing the periodic grade. Now, to display here or compute for the 10% of the grades here in the quiz, we are to use or create or make a formula, okay, using Excel again. So again, we are to start with equal sign, okay, then click at the value we want to compute. Then to display that 10% of this value, we are to multiply it, okay. We use asterisk for the multiplication symbol. We are to multiply 88 to 10%, okay. So we don't use any value here, we just have to point click at the value we want to include in our computation. Okay, so again, we want that the B6 here, which is 88, to change later when we copy the formula. And we wanted that the B5, which is 10%, be still B5, or we are to set this as an absolute reference, while B6 will be relative reference, meaning it will change, this one will not change. Okay, so to do the setting of this B5 as an absolute reference, we are to press F4. There you have it, okay? But B6 later will just change into B7 and so on when we copy the formula. Okay, so after which to see the result of this formula, we are to click enter. So we have here 88.80. Now, we want to compute the rest of the scores using the same formula. Okay, so we just have to click at the fill handle here at the at the right bottom part of the cell. Click, drag, and drop. Okay. So there you have it. We already have computed all the scores. We already displayed here all the equivalent scores of each student. So let's move on to the periodical test. So we shall be using the same formula. Again, we just have to click or start with the equal sign, then click at the grade, then multiply it to the percent. Okay, that is 25%. And let's set the reference type. Let's set the D5 to absolute reference. We are to set the D5 to absolute reference. To do that, we are to press F4. Okay, then enter. Then again, click at the first formula, then drag down. Okay, so do the same procedure to the rest of the criteria. Okay, so again, equals, then the value, multiply it to the 40%. Let's set the F5 or the 40% to absolute reference. It means it will not change later when we drag the formula or copy the formula. Let's press F4. Enter. Okay, so drag down to copy the same formula to compute the rest of the scores. There you have it. Let's move on to the project. So same procedure, we just have to start with the equal sign, then the value, multiply it with the percent, then set the H5 again to absolute reference by pressing F4, enter key. Then drag to copy the formula. There you have it. So this is already, okay, the equivalent grade of each criteria in the components of this grade or of the ICT grading sheet. So let's now move on to compute the whole grade of each student. Okay, so to do that, we simply have to add all the equivalent percentage of each criteria. Okay, so start with equal sign again. Click at equivalent grade for the quiz. Add it to the equivalent percent for the critical test. Then add it again to the performance. Add it again. So since we cannot click anymore the project here, we just have to use arrow to the left. Okay, so still Microsoft Excel will display the cell address of the particular value. Then enter if the formula is already complete. So no need to add more operator if there's nothing more to compute. So just click enter to see the result. So there you have it. So we have here 87.30. Okay, so we want to compute or use the same formula to the rest of the computation. We don't have any absolute reference to set because we want to change. Okay, we wanted to adjust the addresses, the cell addresses when we move or copy or drag the formula. So again, click at the right or the fill handle here at the right bottom part of the cell. Then drag it down to compute the rest of the score. There you have it. Okay, so that's it. That's already the tentative grade. Let's now move on to the periodic grade. So the periodic grade will be the number or the value or the value that will be seen by the parents or by the students, because it will appear at their card, suppose. So you want it a whole number. So all we have to do is to round off the tentative grade here automatically. Okay? So to do the rounding off, I would like to just include here the use of a round function. Although I haven't yet introduced the round function, but I will just give you a sort of idea how the rounding of the values be later. Okay, but we'll be having another lesson about the use of the function. But anyway, I would like to just demo how we are to make use the round function so that we can already compute for the periodic grade. Okay, so the round function, we are to click the value we want to round off, then comma, specify the number of digits you want to round off. Okay, so I want it a whole number, so I will just type here 0. then close, then enter. There you have it. So for the 87, it will only become 87. Okay, 89.45, let's see. Okay, so copy the same formula, drag it down. Okay, there you have it. So automatically the Microsoft Excel will just round off the value. Okay, so 89 will become just 89, 88.80 will become 89, 88.95 will become 89, and so on. Okay, so that's how I do the computation using the Microsoft Excel application. So you can just make your own template too to make your work easy by just the use of Microsoft Excel formula. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you've learned from the lesson.